Hey everyone, so in this video I'll be telling you how you can install Arch Linux into your system. So this video is intended for those users who have used Linux for some times and want to switch to the Arch Linux repo. The main benefit of using the Arch Linux is that it has a rolling release model basically, and it gives you the AURs, the Arch user repository, and also it is pretty lightweight, so basically you can tweak the tweak the distro based on your needs, and it does not comes with a lot of bulky stuff. So basically you can install only those packages that you really need, so that really saves a lot of memory. So so these were the main benefits of the Arch Linux repository. Now without further ado, let's get started. So I have created a document here that states that which are all the steps you need to make sure in order to install the Arch Linux. Few of the steps involves checking whether we are booted into the EFI system, setting the time date, for partitioning the hard drive, formatting it, mounting it, installing the Arch Linux packages, entering into the root system, setting the time zone, etc. etc. I'll be using this document as well as the installation guide, the official Arch Linux installation wiki, throughout the video. Okay. Now for this video I'm using the VirtualBox, but of course you can create your own bootable USB pen drive and you can install it into your main operating install it into your main system. Alright, so let's get started. Now the first step here is checking whether we are booted into the EFI system. Now the Arch wiki states that in order to check whether the boot mode is EFI, we can use this command. So let's open this side by side. Oops, I don't think this will. Okay, this is cool. Alright, so we need to make sure that whether we are booted into the EFI system, EFI boot mode. So this will be ls sys firmware EFI was. Now if you have this kind of output and it does not give you any error, so this means that you have booted into the EFI system, EFI boot mode. Now but if it throws you an error, so you need to check the Arch wiki. So there are few documentation based on the legacy systems. Now the second step is we need to connect to the internet. Since I am using the VirtualBox, so I am already connected, so let's verify it. If you are not connected to the internet, you can using the IWCTL just go through this documentation and you will know how to connect to your Wi-Fi. Or if you are just using a LAN system, so it will be automatically connected, no need to check in that case. Okay, once that is done, we need to set the time date. We can set the time date using this command, time ctl set ntp true. Okay, and we can verify it, ctl status. Now we can check what's the time and you can verify as needed. Now the next step is we need to partition the hard drive. In the installation wiki, it is stated that if we are using the EFI system, we need to have 3 mount points. The first is the MNT boot. Basically the partition is the EFI system partition. Second one is the swap partition, and the third one is the root partition. So basically we need to create 3 partitions of our hard disk. So let's first check how our partitioning looks like. So right now there is nothing much. LSPL, okay, yep. So SDA here, it is pretty empty. So let's format the SDA, the VSDA. So for this I will be using the CG disk. Here they are using the F disk, but I like using the CG disk. So that depends upon your need. Both works the same. CG disk SDA. Now for the first time it will throw you an error, throw you a warning that it is a damage, something like that. So just continue, no need to worry about that. Now the first partition we need to create is the EFI system partition, and this will be a 512 megabits of partition. So enter on the new, enter on the first sector. Second sector will be of the 512 megabits, so this will be 512M. Now since it is a EFI system partition, I don't know this hex code. Here it is written that we need to type L in order to get the hex code, and it is a EFI, so search for the EFI. Okay, so the hex code is EF00. Let's go with that, EF00, and the partition name will be boot. Okay, that is done. We need to create our swap partition. I'll allot 1 gig of swap. Okay, the first sector will be same, second will be 1 gig, and the hex code is 8200, but let's verify it. So it was swap. Yep, it is 8200. Okay, the partition name will be swap. The third partition, and basically the entire remaining space, will be for the root partition, and first sector will be same, second sector will be same, and the hex code will be 8300 only. It is the root partition, and the hex code for the root partition is 8300. Okay, and the root partition name is arch. Okay, so once that is done, we can write our changes. I think I missed. I think I messed up with that, but let's create it again. Okay, so we have our system. Now let's write our changes. That is done, we can quit. Okay, now let's review our changes. VLKID. Okay, so we have our SDA1, SDA2 and SDA3. The SDA1 is the boot partition, SDA2 is the swap, and the SDA3 is the arch, basically the root partition. The next step is we need to format the partitions. Now for formatting the root partition, we need to use the ext4. Let's do that. It is done. We need to create the swap partition. And we need to format our EFI system partition, and for formatting that we need to use the FAT32 system partitioning system. So this will be mkfs.fat f32 SDA1. Alright, so that is done. The next step is we need to mount our partitions. Okay, now in order to mount the partitions, our root partition will be mounted at the MNT. Mount that. Let's mount that. Mount the EVSDA3 MNT. We need to turn our swap partition. Turn on our swap partition, and we need to mount our swap EFI system partition at the MNT boot. For this we'll be using the -mkdir flag. Basically this will make sure that if the boot is not present, it will create that for us. So mkdir gv sta1 t boot. Okay, so this is done. The next step is the next step and the main step is we need to install the packages. Basically these are the main packages that will be installed. That will install the Arch into our hard drive. So in the official wiki, here are few packages that are written. These are the base Linux firmware. Of course I will be installing these packages, but along with that I will also be installing some extra packages like the text editors and the network manager, because right now we are in the installation mode, and once the installation is done, we need to make, in order to connect to the Wi-Fi, especially if you are on Wi-Fi, you need to make sure that you have a network manager in order to connect to the internet. So let's do that. -k mnt base festival Linux firmware Nanoid network manager. I am using network manager as my main package for connecting to the internet, but if you are using any other package like systemd networkd, so you can use that as well. Okay, let's wait for this to be installed. Alright, so the package installation is complete. The next step, let's review the next step. It is to generate the fs tab. Okay, so in the Arch wiki it is written that in order to generate the fs tab, we need to use this command. Basically the fs tab is the file where all the mount points are written. So if I show you, so these are all the partitions we just created, and this will be written in the etc fs tab line. So basically this is the file that you need to use, basically you use if you want to mount the partition permanently in the Linux system. So let's do that. mnt fs tab, that is done. Now we will be entering our newly installed system. Okay, so until this point we were in the basically in the installer. Now we will be entering our newly installed system. So this will be Arch. Okay, so once we have entered, we need to set the time zone. Now I am currently living in the India, but based on your location you can set the time zone. So I'll be writing ln sf user share zone info Asia Kolkata local time. Okay, that is done, and we need to generate an etc address adj time file. So this will be hwc clock. Let's see. Okay, this is done. Now the next step is we need to generate our local.gen. basically this is the local file that will make sure that our keyboard layout, that will make sure that how our keyboard layout and everything is. Okay, so first of all we need to, earlier I told you to install the to install the text editor, so this is where it will come in handy. Vim etc local, and here we need to search for en. Okay, now for me this is the local, but if you have any other local you need to uncomment that. Okay, and we need to generate our local configuration, so this will be local gen. Okay, so once that is done, we need to create our local.conf and we need to set the lang variable accordingly. Local.conf and that is done. There is an explanation in the local.conf. If you want to go through the documentation, you can do that. So for now it is done. Now the next step is we need to set our keyboard layout, but in my case it is the same as the default one, but if in your case it is different, so you can view this part of the documentation. Now we need to create our etc host name. That will be the network config that will be used in the network configuration. So let's create one vim etc and let's name it arch. You can be much more creative than me and you can name it based on your need. Alright, the next step is we need to generate the init ramfs. The explanation for this is written here. However, the documentation states that we need not generate because it is automatically run in the installation, but it also does not hurt to create a new one. It also does not hurt to run this command, and this will make sure that we have a cleaner installation. So let's do that. Okay. There might be some warnings during the installation, but as long as it at the end, if it states that image generation successful, you can be sure that it is done perfectly. Now the next step is we need to set our root password. So with this will be password. Okay, so the password is done, and the final step before we actually reboot our system is we need to install a bootloader. So let's go into the documentation. These are all the common bootloaders that are used in the Linux, but for this one I will be using the grub. It is the most popular one. If you want to use another one, you can go through that documentation. So here in the installation it states that we need to install the packages grub and EFI boot mgr. So let's install it. Now since we are inside the installation, newly installed Linux system, we will not be using the pack step. We will actually be using the pacman. This is the default package manager for the Arch based Linux distros. So pacman is fine. Okay. Okay, so that is done. Now we need to use this command in order to install the grub. So this will be grub target equals to x86 64 equals to here in the documentation it is written that it is equals to the EFI directory equals to ESP, but basically we need to use the boot directory. Also it is written here as well, but just in case during the installation you have used named it something else, you need to use that here, but in our case this will be boot and bootloader ID equals to grub. Okay, so that is done. Installation finished, no error reported. If it does throw an error, you can refer to the documentation. Okay, the second step is we need to generate a grub.cfg file, and we can use this command. grub.cfg. Okay, so it is done. Okay, so we can finally attempt to reboot our system and check whether we come across any errors or something like that. So basically, in a nutshell, it is our first litmus test of our installation. So let's first exit the installation and let's attempt to reboot. Alright, so we can see that it does not reported any errors, and so this means that we successfully installed the Arch Linux. There are few more steps we need to use after once the installation is done. The one of those is we need to enable the network manager, because right now I think we do not have access to the network. Let's verify. See, so that's why during the packstrap stage I told you to install the network manager, because once the installation is done we need to make sure that we have a network manager installed. So let's enable the service. So let's verify. Yeah, the network is working perfectly. If you have installed any other package, so you need to look into that documentation and you need to enable that service. Alright, the network is done. We also need to create a new user, because root is the main, because basically every day using root is not something that is recommended, and so therefore since it has all the privileges and all the access, basically you can delete your entire system without any, if you are logged in as the root. So in order to avoid that, we need to create a new user. So let's do that. I will be creating one with my own name. So user add g users storage wheel power, and my home directory will be user. Oh, okay. So see, sorry. We also need to create a password for the newly created user. So password, yes, so the password updated successfully. Let's go into that user. Let's see, alright, So at this point you can be sure that the entire Linux system is installed successfully. There are few things you can do. One is for sure that you need to install a desktop manager, because uh, on a day-to-day basis you will not be using just the simple TTY. So based on your preference you can install any of the desktop managers like i3, GNOME, KDE. mm, I'll prefer I'll recommend that you first go with the GNOME or KDE, because they are much more user friendly, and once you are comfortable with those you can move to the much more lighter versions like the XFCE and the i3. So that was pretty much for this video. I will be giving you the important links in the description. Thank you for watching, and I hope it was informative. Thank you. Have a nice day.